So Loch, I want to thank you for taking the time from your busy schedule to sit with me and talk about your work. It's an honor and privilege to be with you here today in your office in New York. So you are a author of the recent book Shift into Freedom, a meditation teacher, psychotherapist, founder of the Open Heart and Awareness Institute. So I'm very interested to delve into your work and talk about all these things and these different aspects. But first, I'm interested in knowing about your own personal journey to where you have arrived today.
Okay, sure, yeah, thank you, Michael. It's glad to be here. And yeah, I guess I could say that, you know, throughout my childhood, there were, if I look backwards, I see little glimpses and little shifts and little, you know, insights that I had, or some kind of longing of the heart for something bigger, something greater. But I guess probably the place to start would be when I was a sophomore in college. And during this period of time, about 9 months, I had these 3 losses. 3 people of significance in my life passed away. So first was a year-long process with my father, who developed brain cancer, and he had about, you know, a tumor the size of a lemon, and they, you know, had done this did this surgery, and it went well, and he came back, and he was like, you know, learning almost to return, and then he had an aneurysm, and he went fairly quickly and passed away right before I went to school that year. And then about a few months later, my grandmother, who was older, who had lived with us, she passed away. And then early that spring, my best friend from the ice hockey team from college died in a car accident on his way to see his girlfriend. So it was just this kind of one and then another and another, and I tried to talk to counselors and I tried to talk to my friends, but many of my friends were kind of like, oh, well, you know, let's just go out and, you know, do something else, you know, because they hadn't had that same experience. So I was walking one night after the library closed, and I was kind of trudging up the hill and feeling very heavy, feeling like I was kind of like talking to myself, and something was going on, and I felt like, you know, just kind of heavy and overwhelmed, and I felt like I said to myself, or this voice said, I don't think you can take this much longer. And I happened to kind of feel like I looked back to see what that was, as if for the first time, without knowing that's what I was doing, I turned my awareness around and kind of looked back through my mind, and it felt like I looked back through and opened up into this beautiful night sky. So something opened, something felt connected, open. There was a sense of freedom, of relief, of connection to nature and to the night sky, and then a feeling of almost like support or embodiment, and a feeling of like I was laughing and crying at the same time. I felt like so relieved and so happy and connected. And something about that, what happened there, how quickly it happened, what was that, really led me to be curious about what, you know, if I'm going to do something with my life, this might be something to investigate. As I tried to talk to professors and others, I got some books like William James, Varieties of Religious Experience, where he talked about consciousness and different experiences people had. But I didn't get a lot of feedback right away, and this led me to look in books about Zen and about the Upanishads and other things like that.
Huh, so it put you on a path, so to speak. Maybe you weren't thinking.
Yes. It
was so, but you were willing to question what happened and not discard it and not get stuck in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't feel at that time that it was a religious or even a spiritual path or quest. I just felt like something related to kind of, being in college. Like, I want to know what's true. I want to know what's real. I want to know. And I was open enough. And it was, I guess, that time after the 60s where they were both, kind of meditation, spirituality, education was all coming together about what's going on. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it led you to then kind of like academically study, especially in graduate psychology.
Yes.
And then go off into go to other countries where you came across some teachers of various lineages.
Yes. Yeah. So I ended up within a year of graduating, going to get a Master in Divinity at Union Theological, which was a program in psychology and spirituality. And I went away on a traveling fellowship right after the first year. Went to Sri Lanka, India, Nepal, studied mindfulness meditation. Then I met Father B. Griffiths, who was a Catholic priest who became a Swami. And then I ended up going up to Nepal and met a Tibetan Buddhist teacher, a Dzogchen teacher, Tokpa Urgyen Rinpoche. And he was the one who showed me this kind of way to turn my awareness around intentionally. That was exactly the experience I had had, though I didn't know how I had done it then. But he said, this is the way we do it. And the interesting thing is he had done, in a classical way, like three-year retreats, these long retreats. But after his third 3-year retreat, he supposedly told somebody, he said, well, this true nature that I recognize, this was shown to me when I was 8 years old by my uncle. He said, so it's no different now than it was then. So he started to feel like, well, let me just start giving it out to everyone, showing them, because it's our natural condition.
So it allowed you to put words or wrap up what you had at that younger age in college, that experience with the grieving, into a frame of reference, what exactly it was.
That's right. Yeah. So I felt like there was now a kind of a hope for a how-to, that I could really start to work with a way that wasn't just sitting in long meditations, that was actually a kind of inquiry style practice.
So now you're working, you're a professional field, writing, teaching, and what would you say is your core message that you're trying to transmit?
I would say it's something similar to what I was just saying, which is that there is a way to intentionally access and train to shift out of the small kind of mini-me, the kind of sense of self that is looping thought, patterns of thought, that we can actually shift out into a more spacious and open field of awareness that then is also embodied and has moved from kind of head mind to heart mind. So that there's actually a training. So I consider it a kind of normal stage of human development at this point.
Yeah, that's interesting. You say normal stage, because it really is. So before we go into that, and that it sounds like the title of your book, Shift into Freedom, is your core message, shifting into freedom from small mind. But I saw something on your website, like your bio, said that you teach in a non-sectarian human being lineage based on the earliest non-dual wisdom traditions, modern science, and psychotherapy. So first I want to just ask you, what do you mean by human being lineage? I like that, and I understand, but I just thought you'd clarify it.
So what I mean is that rather than a kind of sectarian or a one religion against another, I just feel like maybe it's time that we're a little more democratic and we realize, we're all in this together. So the lineages, all the human beings have been looking for this. They've described it differently, but that's my lineage, is everyone on the planet.
That's great. I mean, some people call it learning the wisdom traditions or the concept of interspiritual movement, but I don't like the human being lineage.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like Teilhard de Chardin, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin talked about the noosphere.
Yes,
So really,
that's right.
teachings from the noosphere, the
Yeah.
mind sphere.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and so can you say more about your teachings, this teaching based on the non-dual wisdom traditions and
Yeah.
science and psychotherapy?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is some of what I wanted to bring together is, different, recognizing all the dimensions of human experience, from psychological, emotional, mental, physical, to include all those and not to escape them into a transcendent, but the possibility of discovering this transcendent dimension that is awareness, non-conceptual knowing, that is the foundation of knowing, to which then we can use thoughts as needed. So this dimension of consciousness is available, and there's a way of knowing it, a way of accessing it, that when we find this, it changes our whole sense of knowing and also our identity, where we're located. Yeah.
Yeah, and so even with your private clients, you're working towards that
Yes.
that aim.
Yeah, because the first experience of the shifting out of the small sense of self or the mistaken identity is a relief of suffering. So immediately the reports are that not only are you out of the monkey mind or the chattering mind, but you are no longer the thinker, meaning you're not the one who's orienting by thought, and therefore you're not obsessive, you're not referencing the past and projecting worst case scenarios into the future. There's a sense of this long-term perpetual dissatisfaction that drops. So that that's the main obstacle, is not your personality. So when I say, kind of shifting out of ego identification, it actually allows you to be, your own name, your personality is available, your, functioning, even your story, meaning, this is where I grew up and this is what I do and I'm there. So that's not the problem. The problem is actually this little pattern of thinking that when it relaxes and drops and is seen through, and then we access this other dimension of embodied, open-hearted awareness, then there's a lack of obsessive, neurotic suffering, and then you can just deal with your everyday stuff, that you're good at this, you're not good at that, you have this issue you got to deal with, you got that issue, but it's lost about 70% of the weight of suffering.
Yeah, so it's getting away from feeling like you're a victim of circumstances,
Yeah.
to a master of your domain, or
Yeah. And you feel, and the feeling is that you're not like master in terms of being controlled, but you actually feel more interconnected with everyone. You feel like you're flowing, you can respond rather than react. And so that is a natural dimension of consciousness that, rather than trying to create it mentally or through some meditation practice, try to be more accepting, I got to accept everything as it is. When you shift, drop, and open, you discover this dimension of consciousness that's naturally accepting already. So you're not creating it, you're actually discovering that which is what you've been looking for and trying to create.
Yeah, and you're embedding it and embodying it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's important, the embodiment.
Yeah. So what does since your teachings also incorporate modern science,
Yes.
neuroscience, what do those feel? What does science, neuroscience have to say about all this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been amazing that the neuroscience, especially with the development of the fMRI, the ability to look at the brain, has done a lot of work, particularly with mindfulness meditation, other kinds of meditation. They see the different areas of the brain related to stress or related to joy increased, and related to ability to focus. But some of the neuroscientists are studying this more advanced types of meditation, which are basically awareness of awareness meditation, which kind of balances the brain in a way that you're not being led off into distraction all the time. You actually feel like you're equally aware inside and out of what's going on without looking up to thought, and without projecting stuff outside, and without going off into daydream all the time. That there's a kind of a balanced awareness.
So you're saying that like the progressive thinking neuroscientists are mapping out areas in the brain where these certain patterns happen.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading about the scientists who were mapping out what they called the G spot in the brain, the God spot.
Oh yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a little next generation more of what they're doing right now. They're working with one area called the default mode network, which is a type of brain pattern that alternates looking out and looking in. That our brains are always going out, and then it's looking in. Then we're looking out, and we're looking in. And so we can't kind of keep on any task because we're always losing it. We're getting distracted by anything. We're going into our minds. And when we go into our minds, the reports are from people that they create a little story about themselves. When you go into a daydream, the main character is you, and it's trying to satisfy itself through some fantasy or some future resolving of a problem that ends up feeling dissatisfied by the time the end of the daydream is over. And so it leads to kind of an unhappiness, and there's a way to not have that be a primary way.
So yeah, so that's great that neuroscience is looking at this and really helps further awareness of how the brain works, how we work, how it all ties together. So as we further talk, you've talked about awareness, awakening. I just want to ask you what awakening means to you. But I remember on your website, you have a quote that you say that awakening is part art, part science, and a whole lot of mystery.
Yes.
So awakening is what you, through your path, you learned about. So what does awakening mean to you? Yeah,
so in some ways the simplest, the more science part of it is that it is a shift of identity and knowing from this small self-referencing way of operating to a more open-hearted sense of thought-free awareness that is the source of mind and the ground of being. So awakening is really kind of almost a growing up into that that new operating system. So I sometimes call it operating system 1 is the thought-based, small self, and operating system 2 is awareness embodied and operating from open-hearted connection and relating and creating. So that almost stage of growth or way of awakening out of the old identity, but importantly, not the way I do it is not to just deconstruct that and leave people in kind of a limbo, because I found that a lot of people kind of go into couch potato mode, or they have a lot of unconscious material that floods them.
Which in traditional conventional psychotherapy is what happens, mostly. Yeah. So
this, what you do is you resource with the source of mind, which is this non-moving mind, but this spacious awareness mind. And when you're resourcing with that source, you now come back and include all the conscious and unconscious dimensions. But it's not about what's occurring to you, it's about who it's occurring to is what awakening is about. Who or what is all this arising to? If it's arising to a small sense of self, it's too small. It can't handle a full emotional life, and so it gets overwhelmed and anxious, or we repress it and get depressed. But from a bigger sense of self, then everything can be embraced and included, and then things start to liberate, and insights can happen without struggling, wrestling, fighting, or having to repress or run away from our full emotional life.
Yeah. And from a brain science standpoint, would you say like this awakening, the small mind is more in the brainstem, reptilian mind, and the greater mind is from the neocortex? Or is it that's even broader than that.
Yeah, it's even broader than that. It's even more specific. So one way to describe it is there is, in early childhood development, there's a sense that young children are completely identified with their thoughts. They're crawling around, they're putting their hands on the stove, and then their parent says, don't put your hand on the stove, and they just kind of go like, you know, they're just like rolling around. And about 1.5 to 2.5, there's this development of, interestingly, what's called self-awareness, which in this case means awareness that I'm a separate self. And the way that's created is through thinking about thinking. The ability to think, oh, I'm here and I shouldn't touch the stove, and my mother is going to get upset if I do, so I got to think. So it's kind of a mindfulness from thought-based knowing that is an important development of consciousness, but it's supposed to be functional, and what happens is it actually becomes the new basis of identity. So that patterning of thinking about thinking becomes where we orient our identity, and what happens is that little mini-me starts to almost co-opt the boundary program and take itself to be a little entity in our heads, looking out of our eyes, as if it needs to get satisfaction outside and it needs to protect itself from danger. But because there's nothing for it to eat and there's no danger, it's perpetually dissatisfied. And so it's simply by deconstructing and discovering the new center of identity, or the centerless center, that there's a freedom from that perpetual dissatisfaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. That and we can understand it better.
Yes.
Also, so awakening at one time was something like you talked about the Tibetan monks.
Yes, that's right.
It was just Tibetan Buddhism, Zen. It was just nothing special, just happened all the time.
Right.
But it was only, or it was something available more towards those on that path.
That's right.
Or mystics,
Yeah.
but not generally. And
Right.
most people out there in the world never even knew anything about it.
Right.
But now, would you say that awakening is something that's available to anyone and everyone?
Yeah, I think it's becoming part of our culture. One thought I had is, like, 40 years ago, people didn't really know anything about yoga, and it seemed weird, and they were putting their legs behind their head. And now there's like a yoga studio on every corner, and everyone's doing it. And then 20 years ago, there was mindfulness meditation even wasn't yet. It was thought to be kind of weird and Eastern, and took too much time, and was kind of escapist or something. Mm-hmm. And now it's been studied and practiced and brought into schools and hospitals, and so mindfulness meditation is on the map. So my feeling is that awakening, as a developmental new logical step, because yoga goal is awakening and meditation's goal is awakening. So here we go. Let's focus on what does that mean and how do we do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the way awakening is being presented now is just like the term you use, in a non-sectarian
Right.
human being lineage.
That's right.
It's not tied necessarily to any one.
Yeah, that's right. It can be. I mean, certainly
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely people like anything. There's stricter traditions, or people feel comfortable being with a teacher in the Zen
Mm-hmm.
lineage and practicing in the old classical way, and that's fine too. But it seems like there's another opportunity now that to train and wake up.
Yeah, and wake up, be awakened, and kind of let go of the shackles in a way,
Right.
and be a fully formed human being.
Yes.
In how you put yourself in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And from my personal opinion, I think that's the hope of the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
So so another thing you say on your website in talking about awareness is that thinking and the five senses can't know your true nature. Your ego will not wake up. Mm-hmm. The seeker who begins the journey cannot find the true self.
Right.
And only awareness can know who you already are.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
So, I mean, that is one of the reasons. So you wonder, I mean, one of the questions that may come up is like, oh, well, if awakening is so natural, why have so few found it, you know? And one of the reasons is because the way we've tried to know it is with the dimensions or the aspects of ourself that we try to know everything else, which is our mind, our will, our effort, through will, through intentional, conceptual knowing. So the awareness is of a different dimension of consciousness, and because it's non-conceptual, it can't be known by conceptual thinking. It's not a thing. So you can't, the one who starts the seeking, that pattern of the I, in order to wake up, has to let go of itself as a seeker. So only awareness can know awareness means that we have to discover where is that awareness that can know itself, and then that awareness can know thought and feeling and sensation. So thought can't know awareness, but awareness can know and is inherent within thought when it's primary. So that's the tricky thing. That's not on our map, is this awake awareness as intelligence, as kind of thought-free wisdom mind. And so getting a feel for that, you can read all about it, you can, like study and read these poems that sound beautiful, oh, that's lovely, but it's really like, can you directly experience, can the awareness shift so that you feel like you're out of the conceptual mind and you're in operating from this awareness-based knowing.
Yeah, so in a way it's like manifesting your being.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that makes me think of a question that would be related to like your private practice. Let's say you have a client you're seeing and they're doing a good job of really bringing that awareness into action, into manifesting their being. Then they come in to see you, like let's say they're seeing you once a week. They come in and see you and they just walk in and they're all just in a tiz. They're saying, oh my God, the last few days have been tough. My boss just laid a trip on me, and my spouse is just like, oh, they're just too much. And, the weight of the world, all this stuff. And they're losing that. And this is, happens to a lot of people. They lose it, caught up in the everyday. So what would be your counsel? Yeah.
So the interesting thing is, in some ways, in some ways, the only answer to every question is shift. So in other words, I can't tell them what to do, and I can't discuss it with them on the level that they're upset, which is what most psychotherapies are operating on, that level. Oh, you should try to understand your boss. Maybe he doesn't really mean that. And you're in the, on the chessboard of the mind, moving pieces around. So what I do is like say, okay, tell me more. Are you okay? Let them tell the story, and say, okay, now you ready? Should we shift and look at it again? So then we shift, unhook, drop, open, know, include, and then relate and create, and then okay, now come back and see what's true, what's here. Feel that situation. Look at that again from within. What's been going on? What's here now? Start with a beginner's mind and see what's true, and immediately everything shifts. The view is different. Yeah.
So basically, you're doing what the great wisdom tradition do of helping them self-inquiry.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
not
exactly
getting caught
right.
in, as they say, like moving the mental pieces around, playing mental chess.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would say that the main role of a teacher is to introduce someone to their inner teacher. So that's the teaching of, there's teacher inquiry where the teacher asks, but even my book and my audio starts out with me leading guided practices, but the idea is for them to feel the navigating of their own consciousness, and then not having to listen eventually to my voice, but internalize, unhook, drop, open, include, and feel it. Then they don't even have to say the words, they just go.
Yeah.
And then they're actually literally within that short amount of time, if you're looking at the brain has changed, like it comes to a stop, like the energy areas go, and they change like fairly quickly. So that's the amazing thing, is to have this set of tools to do that. And the tools are not thought, like positive thinking or insight, or the tools are awareness, that literally by moving your awareness out of a certain dimension of consciousness and a looping pattern into other dimensions of consciousness, that changes your physiological brain.
Yeah.
Which is wild, right?
Yeah. So then let's talk about your book. You talk about shifting, and so the book, Shift into Freedom: The Science and Practice of Open-Hearted Awareness.
Yes.
So what is the message then? I mean, basically I've talked about, but to distill it down, the message of the book, what is that?
I mean, a few of the messages are, one is that there's potential to awaken in the midst of your daily life, that anybody with intentionality can shift out of their current way of operating in terms of their identity and their way of knowing, and access this relief of suffering and these natural qualities of well-being, okayness, love, interconnection, intentionally, through mostly small glimpses many times rather than long periods of meditation, with eyes open in the midst of your day, just retraining your whole system to do this, and that it's a possibility to do it, just as we've learned other things in life. It takes a little habit, but it's kind of the advanced meditations, but they're not, you don't have to go off into a cave, you don't have to join a monastery, but these very particular inquiry type movements of awareness are taken from these kind of advanced direct practices and can be learned because we all have the same type of consciousness.
And in your book, you begin with the story of your college days and the experience you went through. And in a way, like shifting into freedom away from suffering. I mean, you could have been caught in the suffering of it if you didn't have your experience and then have a way to understand what that experience was all about.
That's right. Yes, yeah. And I see that, when people come to me, I mean, people who, being in New York, as a New York psychotherapist, I've worked in clinics with, major Axis 1 diagnosis, bipolar, schizophrenic, major depression, and worked with these techniques with people like this over time, and they take away, that they do the same thing. They don't change the entire structure of the person, but they take away this extra suffering that's on top of it, this self-consciousness and the worry and the fear and the anxiety, and let people, say, one person said, now I can laugh at myself, it's great, or someone said, my load is lightened. Just like that kind of thing, and that's what that is. And then I've also worked with, being here, some of the most successful people in the world. So they come, and what are they doing here? Well, they've checked off every list. They're rich, they're married, they got family, they got houses, they've got vacations, and what are they doing? I'm miserable. Why are you miserable? Is it something? I don't know what it is. It seems it should be okay. I should be, because I've got everything I've tried to find, but the perpetual dissatisfaction is still not slowing down. It's still creating a tremendous amount of suffering. It's grasping at, what am I going to do? Who am I? What's wrong with me? This perpetual kind of problem solving about this mini-me rather than their personality or their physical life.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, how in your book and in your practice you show people the practical ways. But before that, I'm curious, what are your hopes with your book, Shift into Freedom?
I mean, I would like to create, a program, maybe a 2-year program or longer ongoing training for people, so that we can get a group of people who are awakening and stabilizing in the midst of the world, and it just becomes like, like a group of people that practice yoga becomes bigger, a group of people that practice meditation becomes bigger, a group of people that just say, oh yeah, well, I'm doing the awakening thing, I feel much better, what's happened? And they're able to be honest, well, this is not working so well, but this is really working, this has definitely changed, and this I'm still, having difficulty with, but there's a clear sense of bringing it into the culture in a way that create a support group, but again, non-religious, non-guru, non-sectarian, kind of a modern contemporary education, and hopefully bring it, into to kids and to other. Yeah. Although that probably won't be my first thing I do. I'm probably going to work with adults to get a group, let them work with their kids, and then find some other people who are. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it seems like a natural progression because you teach at Kripalu
That's right.
Yoga Center and Omega Institute and other centers around the country.
That's right.
So yeah, teaching online or longer. Yeah. So then, what are the practical ways that, as you teach in your book and with your clients, that people can shift into freedom?
Yeah. I mean, that's there's each chapter has kind of got like 3 to 5 practices at the end of each chapter, and there's a audio or a CD or downloadable audio that has 31 different practices, and they're divided up into kind of different learning types and use different sense stores, and they're a way to learn how to navigate your consciousness through learning how to move awareness throughout your body and mind, and then refine it and familiarize yourself with it. So it takes a little time to go into full full training of it, but one sense is the idea that, or the feeling that, this looping pattern of consciousness is that awareness is identified with thinking. So if awareness can literally step back or unhook and then know your jaw directly from within, know your throat directly from within, drop into your heart space and not look up to thought, not look down from thought, but literally have the intelligence of your awareness relocate from head to heart, then you immediately report kind of a sense of less chattering mind, more peace of mind, more embodied awareness, more sense of love or joy. So that's kind of a little example of that.
Yeah, and the subtitle of your book mentions the phrase open-hearted awareness. Yes. So that's a very important or focal aspect of it.
Yes.
So how would you define that term?
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of the final goal in some systems of awakening. Awakening is described as just deconstructing the small sense of self. So you just deconstruct, and once you deconstruct, you can deconstruct so much that you then deconstruct your personality and you're actually have no feelings. And some people define awakening as I have no feelings, no negative feelings. The other definition is you step out of this small sense of self or ego identification, and you go into pure awareness. And now you're in pure awareness, and as pure awareness, you are free of suffering, but you're also a detached witness. You're not embodied, you're not connected to your everyday life, and it's hard to operate from there. You're in this kind of detached space. So what I do is often go from waking up from the mini-me and then into awake awareness, and then awake awareness wakes into the body. So the awareness starts to realize that not only, as they say in Mahayana Buddhism, form is emptiness, but then emptiness is form. So there's a waking back in of awareness, so there's a feeling of being embodied and fully alive, and there's a shift from head to heart, mind. So there's a sense of presence, inner body presence, and then from the heart mind, there's ability to create and relate and start to rewire the brain so you can function from here. So I call so pure awareness is not the goal, even presence is not the goal. Heart mind or open-hearted awareness is the word. I'm trying to make it a little simpler than heart mind, or the Tibetan word bodhicitta, or those, which is awake consciousness, which has a compassionate feeling to it. So that's the operating system. The new operating system operates from a new way of being connected and rewired, and yet isn't pure awareness and isn't just embodied. You're not blissed in, you're not spaced out. The open-hearted awareness is relating and creating. So that's the definition of that. So it's kind of a full definition of awakening.
Right, and it's an embodied awakening.
Yes, embodied.
Yeah. And you talk in your book about waking up
yeah.
and also growing up, so
Yes.
that's part of it.
Yeah.
And how do you define that, the growing up part of waking up?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, growing up is what we all know about growing up. We grow up in different ways, physically, mentally, emotionally, relationship. So all these lines and levels of development are important to continue to grow up. But my sense is you can only grow up to a certain degree unless you wake up. Because you can grow up with the ego identity as the highest level that it can possibly do, but it still can't handle everything, and it's not a developmental sense of identity that it can only go to a certain level. So at that point, once you grow up, when you wake up, you wake into this supportive field of intelligence and capacity to love and to live. So then you continue to grow up, because you could also bypass if you go into pure awareness, and then you think you're done, and then you could not grow up, and then you can, as some teachers have done, act out because they didn't grow up.
Right.
So both are important.
Yeah. So we need. So as you're saying, then we need both are an important part of the.
That's right.
That process of awakening.
Yes.
The path towards enlightenment.
Yeah, and full human. So awakening is really the full human capacity that, in some ways, from ego identification, you can't even live a fully intimate human life. You only can go to certain, and you keep bumping your head on the ceiling, and only by having this larger capacity can you then, laugh when you're happy and cry when you're sad, and feel like, as the scientists say, that an emotion, if it's felt fully without being reactive, lasts 90 seconds in the brain. So if you feel angry or you feel sad, on a small level, not on a grief level, but just on a small level, if you don't react to it, join it, fight it, flight it, you'll feel it, and then it'll go.
Yeah. So this concept also of growing up, waking up, is really the teachings of I mean, the people who teach like developmentalism, whether it's psychology. Right. Psychology only goes so far, but developmental consciousness, some call it integral consciousness, but I mean that's really that we have the ability to continue to develop, evolve to higher levels of capability.
Yeah, no doubt that it's not waking up is not just an either or, not just I'm not awake, I'm awake, it's done. It's not a goal, it's not a final solution, that's it, there's no more. It's really a progressive, ongoing, practical.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, like there are teachers, spiritual teachers who have done things of abuse, whether financially or sexually with students, and so there's something missing in their own.
That's right.
Growing up process.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so it's important for us, I think, as a culture, because hopefully this is leading us to, the waking up is for all beings, for our society to have the capacity to live together, to solve some of the problems of society and modern life.
Yeah, yeah. So with this concept of open-hearted awareness, you have an institute, the Open-Hearted Awareness Institute.
Right.
What is the mission of the institute?
Yeah, so the mission of the institute is to train people to fully, awaken into this sense of living from open-hearted awareness in the middle of everyday life. So in the middle of New York City, in the middle of wherever their life, a full life. One of the students this morning said she has 3 kids at home, and she's going to start trying to practice this. She hasn't been able to sit, but now that she realizes she can do this with her eyes open while she's cooking or while she's doing something else, she can do these exercises, and she was very happy, crying and with joy.
Yeah. So which I was thinking about this a little earlier. I mean, the mind, the monkey mind, that habitual patterning mind. Really, it's all about habits.
Yeah.
There was that book a couple of years ago, The Power of Habits.
Right.
And as the author of that book pointed out, habits can change. Sometimes not that complicated. But changing the way we habitually do things or think or
so the habit isn't working with habits within the small mind, but developing a habit of stepping out and then training to remain and operate from there. And it takes everything takes time habitually to fully integrate.
But once these types of habits are regularly practiced, they become the more habitual pattern.
That's right, exactly.
Good habits.
Yeah, and that's the hope, is that this is like anything else. I mean, I've found that people to get to a good enough stage in this takes the same amount of time as people doing mindfulness meditation. So if 2 beginners start, one with mindfulness, one with yoga, one with these kind of awakening, shift into freedom exercises, to get to the level of the good enough practitioners about the same amount of time. The thing is that the open-hearted awareness person will have the freedom in the midst of their life. It won't be just during the times they're doing yoga or during the times they're meditating, and they'll have a whole different range of capacity.
Yeah. So I saw a quote also on the Open-Hearted Awareness Institute section of your website, and it struck me, and I want to ask you to say more about the quote. The quote was, and it's a quote from you, when we see the same inner light of awareness in another's eye, a person that is not from our neighborhood, tribe, or culture, then we have the first glimmer of hope for peace on earth.
Right.
So that struck me, it resonated with me, so I'm wondering if you'd say more.
So in some ways that is that movement from kind of inner peace or meditation state to being able to start to see that there's some kind of same, that you start to realize, oh, this person's the same as me on the level, not just on a human level, but there's almost a consciousness that's, oh, we're the same. There's a brightness that even like, oh, we're both human beings or something. But when you see that light shining through, there's a kind of extraordinary, almost like relief and connection that is part of this seeing from open-hearted awareness.
Really? So it's really, in a way, it's people connecting heart to heart.
That's right.
And when we do that, when we let go of our difference, or the differences that we perceive about the other.
That's right.
And we see each other heart to heart. We connect better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's and that's the hope. That's the foundation of hopefully what can help us see beyond race and culture and differences and ethnic groups and land issues.
Yeah. And also, as part of the Open-Hearted Awareness Institute, you have a research component that is called the Effortless Mindfulness Center for Research.
Yes.
And as it says about it, it's focused on bringing together science, contemplation, and psychology to discover and verify real results in the reduction of suffering and improved human relations.
Mm-hmm.
So how does the center work or operate?
Yeah, so it's a collaborative work with scientists and meeting at conferences, and then developing protocols for experiments. You know, after the scientists usually have to get the grants, and then they ask me on board to help either develop the protocols or to be a research subject. And the sense is that there's a way that that there's a new kind of collaboration with science and with psychology, and that we're all kind of working toward the same goal. So
yeah, towards that leading edge of understanding the intersection of science, consciousness, spirituality, and towards understanding this process, growing up, waking up, awareness better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so this effortless mindfulness is that that discovery that there's actually a kind of awareness that isn't focused from the moving mind, that when we discover this awareness that's already aware and able to focus effortlessly from this spacious mind, there's a kind of ability to both enter what's often called the flow state. So people who are, operate as artists, musicians, athletes, talk about this flow state or being in the zone, which is actually high functioning, effortless, egoless, interconnected, being in the now, feeling kind of a time slowing down, and ability to focus without looking up to thought and remembering exactly what you're supposed to do, but trusting almost a kind of continuous intuition.
What some call effortless effort, or the Taoists called Wu Wei, and you mentioned the term Wu Wei in your book.
Yes, that's right.
I remember when I studied Taoism in college, and the teacher talked about this Wu Wei, effortless effort. I think all the students in class could not wrap our minds around it.
That's right, and then because then he gave you a test on it, and, and you were like, "Wait a minute, do we have to? We don't have to study, right?"
Yeah. So then one of the final chapters in your book is called "The Next Stage in Human Development."
Right.
So what would you say is the next stage in human development?
Yeah. So it's this ability to shift out of the current constellation of consciousness from our identity and access these other dimensions of perception, knowing, and feeling of interconnection. So that level of development is kind of this waking up and then waking in and waking out. So it's the ability to operate in kind of a flow state from this open-hearted awareness, so that there's a sense of relief of suffering, and yet highly functional, non-neurotic, and really almost like the absence of shame, I think I talk about there, because shame, the feeling people report, is a sense of well-being or okayness on the level of identity, that who I am is okay, that there isn't a problem, that the sense of any kind of worthlessness, unlovability, being stupid, being wrong or bad, that's what really goes, because the identity is untied from actions and functional doing things wrong and getting things wrong and making mistakes. Like all that happens to everyone, or making bad choices. That's about functioning, that's about actions. It's not about identity. That who you are is not, it has ignorance to it, but it's not, there's nothing evil, bad, wrong, stupid, worthless, unlovable. And that feeling of that experience of that is what relieves another level of suffering, that kind of shame-free, fear-free sense of well-being, love.
Right, and that's truly when you're able to move past there is true freedom.
Yeah.
Because you don't become a victim of your own thoughts, too.
That's right.
Yeah, and then delve into that suffering.
That's right. Yeah, you're not hyper-vigilant around that. Yeah.
Yeah. So tied in with this, the later chapter, Next Stage in Human Development, you open the book, I believe you opened the book with the quote from Albert Einstein.
Right.
And I'll just read the last two sentences
Sure.
from the quote. It's a longer quote where it says, "The true value of a human being is determined primarily by the measure and the sense in which he has attained liberation from the self.
Right.
We shall require a substantially new manner of thinking if humanity is to survive."
Right.
So would you say this new manner of thinking is that next
Yes.
stage in development?
It's this non-conceptual thinking. It's a non-conceptual knowing. So it's a new manner of thinking, and it's the thinking from the heart mind or from this non-thought-based, awareness-based knowing, which he certainly had this intuitive ability.
I was genius in many ways.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I mean, he says it. Those two sentences kind of sum up, from somebody who was certainly the cutting edge, way ahead of us in our generation, was saying that. And here we are, hopefully putting it into action now, that the liberation from the self, from that small self, and a new manner of thinking. So the identity and the new way of knowing is exactly the simplest way to say that.
Yeah. And so it's apt that you put that at the beginning of the book, because that's in a way your core message.
That's right.
That's really, and would you say that this next stage in human development, there's a relationship between that and kind of this awakening, waking in, waking out, growing up, and transformation at a societal level?
Yes, and that's obviously the goal, because we're social creatures, and we're at a place where I think a lot of the suffering has been created by a small sense of self, being in our dualistic mind, seeing other everywhere, creating a sense of division and competition around self-centered goals. Those who have power are using that. So this hopefully can open people from all levels to see what the real higher purpose or ability to realize that we're not separate from each other.
Yeah, and so you're right, and those things you mentioned, the small mind, the self-centeredness is really the impediments holding us back from connecting to one another.
That's right.
And taking us down that slippery slope.
Yes. Yeah, so in some ways, I'm starting from that kind of microcosm, from that changing of the inner consciousness, because if you just change belief, I mean, a lot of people are, changing belief. Let's try to do more positive things for the world. Well, that's a lot of people. Then there are, Democrats and Republicans saying the same thing. Then there's even more, they're all trying to have positive beliefs based on what they think is best, and, implementing strategies that are for the good of all people, but they're just so divergent. So you to come back down to the home base and see everything from the shift of consciousness, hopefully that can create even dialogue among people of different views.
Yeah, and it appears that there are more people shifting into freedom, shifting consciousness.
Yes. Yeah.
You as an observer, you're a keen observer of the human condition, you'd say that. Yeah, and that reminds me of the quote from Barbara Marx Hubbard, who I interviewed in an earlier time.
Okay.
She says that crises are evolutionary drivers. So whether it takes crises for more people to wake up,
that's right.
Could be true, not, but there are more people.
That's right.
Yeah. So Loch, where do you see, what is the vision that you see for taking the direction of your work?
Yeah. So my work is very much focused on these how-to tools. So I feel like what I can offer in my particular strengths are that I've kind of mapped the simple dimension of transformation of consciousness, and then more importantly, I've kind of figured out how to do this kind of inquiry or use these tools of awareness to navigate, to actually shift out, to open, to include, so that people can, in a very short amount of time, experience a glimpse of this other dimension, and then hopefully, because it's so close, they can go like, wow, this is what I've been looking for. And then that will motivate them on their own to say, all right, let's do it. Let's train to live from here rather than just have little meditation experiences. So it's really a kind of a full map And then mainly this set of tools and this how to do it, and then setting it up in a context that's this non-guru, non-sectarian, let's all do it together. Even though I have, a very particular way of doing it, I have a couple of variations and let people do, they do their own thing within that. And then, I'll collaborate with other people who are doing it, from another language system or approach.
Yeah, but I think what's really great and wise about the way you teach is that the language is very practical. I mean, you're calling from wisdom traditions and also science, so it's a language that people can understand, because I say it's non-sectarian human being lineage, so people can grasp it easy and understand, hey, I too can wake up.
Yes, that's right.
This is available to me.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So if people want to learn more about your work, what would be the best way to do so? Yeah,
so probably go to my website, www.lochkelly.org, LOCHKELLY.org, and you'll see my book and audio CD,
Shift into Freedom,
the Science and Practice of Open-Hearted Awareness. You can also go and look them up on Amazon and download the audio from Audible. And particularly the audio is, the book is like the textbook that will, give the thesis, and I go through academic psychology, wisdom traditions, psychotherapy, neuroscience, and kind of come at this from all those angles and try to bring them together to support this whole thing. But the practices on the audio will lead you directly into the experience of this in a very short time. If people go through the audio first, then they'll be interested in, like, what was that? And they'll go back and kind of look at, or you can go the other way around. But I've found that some people who started with the audio were became then fascinated with the book, because they think, now the book makes sense, and I'm kind of motivated because I've had the experience.
Yeah.
Whereas if you read it's hard to read a meditation in a book. You read it and you have to do it, and you're reading it and do it. So, but they're, both available. And then I have, classes and travel around the country and weekends and retreats and things like that.
So people can learn all that, and it's great that you have both a book and audio book to tie in with each other. Yeah, so people go on lochkelly.org and can learn all about your work and where you teach and everything. Right. So I want to thank you, Loch. It's really been a privilege.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming down.